Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Romali here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for June 21st, 2020, recorded around 2:18 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, real quickly, we do want to keep talking about this. Our unmanned camera system project is coming together nicely. We have started to begin phase 2 of testing, which means using the ratchet straps, tying it down to the tree, letting it go for the full 11 hours. And we actually we started our 11-hour test this morning. We're working out some of the quirks with the system right now, still trying to get everything going as this is relatively new. But again, this camera system is going to be able to provide all the footage of the raw power and fury of these tropical cyclones as they make landfall along the coastline. And again, this is what the camera system looks like. It's really just a Pelican case with a clear dome, the GoPro inside of it, a lithium-ion battery pack in there that can support up to 30 hours of runtime. This is going to be the ultimate test, our 11-hour test, as we work out some of the quirks with this system. Again, if you guys do want to go follow me and support me on what I'm doing and check out what exactly it is that I'm doing, go follow me on Twitter at Mike Romali1. That's REMALY1. Again, follow me there for consistent updates on what is going on. Now, taking a look at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies updated as of yesterday, we continue to see the rapid decline in the Nino 3.4 region. This is roughly the indicator that we use for the ENSO conditions, basically. And we are heading towards a cool neutral, towards a La Nina type environment by the time we get into the peak of the hurricane season. Likely to be a cool neutral to a weak La Nina. And a weak cool neutral to a weak La Nina is actually more favorable in the Atlantic Basin than a strong, overwhelming positive La Nina. That is favored for more Atlantic development out in the main development region. And speaking of the main development region, this area continues to warm even with the Saharan air. Now, there is a little bit of a lag period. There's still more Saharan air that is coming off the coastline of Africa that is going to be pushing its way across this area over the next several days. You can see a little bit of that cooling effect there to the north and east of the Cabo Verde Islands. But for the most part, the main development region continues to favor a AMO or Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, and it's in its phase 1, which means this typically favors the main development region of the Atlantic Basin to warm significantly, and in some cases now a full ½ degree to a degree Celsius above the long-term average, extending all the way into the southwestern Atlantic, the Caribbean, and portions of the Gulf of Mexico as well, while our areas out here in the tropical Pacific continue to show a decline in the anomalies, suggesting we are heading likely towards a La Nina. You see these cooler than normal anomalies that's only going to amplify over the next several weeks to months. And if we take a look here at the upper ocean heat content, this is the measure of how far down does the warmer water go, how deep is it, and what's the latent heat release potential and other culminating factors. As you start to get into these greens, yellows, and oranges, that's your higher upper ocean heat content values. That's the higher potential for tropical cyclones to take advantage of that environment. And we're seeing that now really favoring right now in the Caribbean and southwestern Atlantic basins. Again, even some of these lighter blue colors, these indicate the higher upper ocean heat content. There's not a zero amount there. There is some out here for tropical cyclones to take advantage of. And again, right now, it's mainly focused in the southwestern Atlantic Basin. Although you do notice here, and we'll zoom in so you guys can really see this, here in the southern, just to the south of the Cabo Verde Islands, you notice that there's a peak starting to occur there with some of these upper ocean heat content numbers. And this is only going to continue to rise throughout the next several weeks to months. Again, that's kind of your highlight of those anomaly or patterns there, not anomalies, but these the higher upper ocean heat content values. And even out here, the numbers aren't necessarily zero. There is some, just not a lot for it to be measured. But there is enough now starting to creep northward as the MDR continues to warm. And this is expected to continue as we go on throughout the next several weeks to months. And again, it's only a matter of time before these tropical waves really start to find a very favorable environment out here to work with. Again, This is our phase 2 of testing that we're beginning today, with phase 1 really being completed. We started the phase 2 yesterday. We got some good feedback, and we're working out and kind of sorting out the quirks in the system right now. This is a 7 to 10 day testing period, or it can be extended as needed, but we are putting it in the casing and everything else like you have seen here. We're putting it in the case using all these ratchet traps and letting it go for 11 hours. This is going to be able to capture all the fury in the raw power of the tropical cyclones as they make landfall right along the coastlines. We're going to be putting them out. These are going to be live operational cameras, so anybody could watch them, not behind a paywall or anything. So if you guys do want to see what we're doing, make sure to go check me out on Twitter here at MikeRomali1, and you'll get to see more of exactly what we're doing and how we're working with other people. We are going to be teaming up with some other people in this field that do the same thing. Hopefully, you might know Mark Suddeth with HurricaneTrack.com. We look to be hopefully teaming up with him if they do make a field mission down here to Florida. So if that happens, we will let you guys know. But otherwise than that, we are conducting this. We are in phase 2 of testing. The next phase is fully operational, which is phase 3. So make sure to go check me out and follow me out on Twitter to see exactly how I'm doing this and what I plan to do for the upcoming future with these projects. Now, taking a look here at the actual sea surface temperatures coming off the CDAS methodology from tropicaltidbits.com. Once again, this is kind of our magic 26.5 degrees Celsius isotherm right here. You notice how that's really now starting to snake its way out into the southern main development region of the Atlantic Basin, certainly the western half of the basin. We got about 50 west is right here. You notice how that's kind of bending back now towards that 40 west line. Again, this area is going to continue to be favored for additional warming over the next several weeks or so, and this is going to continue to get warmer and warmer. So what we're going to do is we're going to revisit this every single day and show the progression over the next few weeks of how this area continues to warm despite some of the Saharan air outbreaks. We've seen that significant Saharan air event, but it's still continued to warm a little bit, so it's quite impressive there. There is a little bit of a lag period, however, with that. Water temperatures out here in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, very warm here, about 28 to 30 Celsius in portions, about 30 Celsius out here in the southeastern Pacific Basin, where we do have some stuff to talk about. We'll get to that here in just a few minutes. But again, overall, thermodynamically, this area of the world is now favored for tropical cyclone activity. The main development region is coming to life and is expected to become more favorable over the next several weeks or so. And again, you'll be able to see that as we go on, these tropical waves will become more and more vigorous, and more tropical waves will try to develop out here in the MDR. So very important to see how this evolves here over the next several weeks or so. And what I did find interesting is, again, this is the coming off the CDAS methodology from tropicaltidbits.com. This is just another way of plotting this. And again, this comes from the SST anomalies. You notice how we had that big dip out here towards late April into early May. We slowly began to climb, and then eventually we significantly climbed here towards the end of May into June. We did fall off a little bit here, and then we peaked right back up again. So these sea surface temperatures are fairly warm, above the long-term average. Today's contributor almost a little over 0.46, and that is in Celsius. And again, that only will continue to amplify as we go on throughout time. So the MDR is warming, the tropical Atlantic is coming to life, and it's almost go time now for the deep tropics. Speaking of the tropics, this is the satellite image coming from Cod Meteorology, College DuPage website. You notice here this large Saharan air outbreak now moving its way into the Caribbean and the Lesser Antilles. Lots of dust and particulate matter being distributed over the islands right now, and there's this large Saharan air plume. Now, over the next several days, all of this will continue to move off towards the east here. Eventually, the Saharan air plume is going to make its way into the southeastern United States and the Gulf Coast, and that's going to provide for some amazing sunsets over here in the Gulf Coast states, including Florida and Texas, and may even get all the way up into portions of Oklahoma and Arkansas up there near Little Rock. Certainly maybe the I-35 corridor, certainly up there. That is the potential right now that we're kind of looking at. So certainly if you have any respiratory problems, again, make sure to wear a mask. You know, these things do block out the sunlight. They do make it harder to breathe if you have a respiratory problem. So be aware that this is something to be aware of, not something significantly dangerous, but if you don't take the right precautions, this could be dangerous to you in your health if you have respiratory problems. Again, right now this is approaching the Puerto Rico area and St. Croix Island there. And again, this is going to continue to move off towards the east over the next several days or so. You also notice there is a disturbance out here in the Atlantic Basin with a 40% chance of developing over the next 48 hours, really. This is becoming close now to becoming a subtropical system out here off the mid-Atlantic coastline and the northeast coastline, as this will begin to eventually move off towards the northwest here and then eventually bend back towards the north and east here over the next couple of days. This really only has the next 12 to 24 hours to actually develop, as it's going to move into cooler sea surface temperatures, and after that no longer really be a significant cause for concern for development at that time. You also notice out here in the eastern Pacific Basin, there is some activity now starting to come to life. We have a line of tropical activity now starting to kind of form along this monsoonal trough. A couple of pieces might break off and try to develop here, and the National Hurricane Center has highlighted 3 separate areas for development over the next 5 days, starting with this area towards way off towards the south and east of Hawaii. There just to the south, that is directly southwest of the Cabo San Lucas resorts there. This has a 40% over the next 5 days and a 20% over the next 48 hours, as this system will generally head off towards the north and west here. There's another system separate from that with a 50% over the next 5 days and 30% over the next 48 hours, which is generally expected to travel off towards the north and west here. These two systems are no big concern to land, although they may generate some swells for portions of the Central American and Mexican coastlines and Cabo San Lucas over here. And then there is another area of disturbance here with a 50% chance over the next 5 days and 0% over the next 48 hours. This one is the closest to land, and we will have to watch this for any potential land impacts to portions of Mexico and Central American coastlines here over the next several days or so, as this also is expected to head off towards the north and west. Again, maybe some swell impacts for Cabo San Lucas, but no direct impacts are expected at this point in time. And in the Atlantic Basin, this is our Invest 95L right now that is expected to drift off towards the northwest here over the next couple of hours, and eventually make a turn back towards the northeast here, and then eventually potentially kind of curving back around here off towards the east-southeast over the next coming days. This really only has a chance for developing here over the next 48 hours, as this generally is going to move off and towards the cooler waters here over the next several hours or so, and eventually find its way in unfavorable conditions out here. But it does look relatively impressive. Again, there is a nice low-level center associated with it. Again, somewhat displaced from the convection. That center circulation is right here, with all the convection off towards the north here. Kind of this little comma-shaped area to the north of the system. That is generally not expected to do really much, although up towards the northeast here, certainly off of some of the outer coastlines, this may bring some squally conditions to those areas. Certainly some high clouds that will be streaming in, maybe some rain showers and gusty winds with times. Other than that, this really poses no significant threat to those areas at all. And taking a look here at the 850 millibar vorticity, or the spin in the atmosphere about 5,000 feet off the ground, once you start getting into these reds and whites, that's your higher cyclonic spin at the 5,000 foot level. Again, what you're looking at right here is Invest 95L, which is generally expected to move sort of off towards the north and west here, and then eventually bend back towards the northeast, and then eventually towards the south and east over the next coming days or so. This is all that area of bundled energy and vorticity down here in the tropical Pacific. Again, this might go on to develop into something, this larger monsoonal pattern that's been occurring over the last couple of days or so, excuse me, is going to try to break off into little bits of vorticity that could bundle itself together and become a couple separate tropical cyclones over the next coming days or so. So we'll really have to watch that. This may provide a temporary increase in shear across portions of the Atlantic Basin, but as I'm about to show here in another minute, the Atlantic Basin is getting ready to turn on here at a moment's notice, basically. If we take a look at the current shear, however, there is a deep line of shear right now stretching all the way from Texas all the way into the main development region with a large area of shear, really not allowing for anything to develop. You noticed over our system right now about 15 to 20 knots of shear in Vest 95L, but again, the water temperatures are really going to be the primary inhibiting factor with that one. And out here in the Eastern Pacific Basin, things are starting to quiet and lessen up in terms of the wind shear, allowing a couple separate different tropical cyclones to potentially develop out towards the next week or so. Now, and taking a look here at the GEFS forecast model here. This is basically the GFS and its ensemble guidance from tropicaltidbits.com. This runs out through July 6th, and this is the 12 to 16 day pattern from July 1st to July 6th. Again, this is what we're looking at here. This blue anomaly here, that's your lesser wind shear, and the reds are your stronger vertical wind shear across the area. You start to notice what actually happens is that this area starts to become a higher wind shear magnet in the Eastern Pacific Basin, while we start to end up actually reducing the vertical wind shear in the Caribbean and the main development region of the Atlantic Basin. We really reduce that wind shear. And vice versa, this is the GEPS, a different forecasting system here. And this is basically just the ensemble guidance once again through the same days. You notice how this area really lessens its area of wind shear over the coming days to weeks. That's going to allow for some potential development. Not a lot of wind shear on this model in the Eastern Pacific Basin, but the main key takeaway is that models are indicating a lowering in the pressures down here, and that's what we're showing here on the GFS forecast model. This is, again, from tropicaltidbits.com, out here way out in time, but it's been picked up by the European model as well. This is not to look at necessarily where tropical systems are going to form. This is taking a look at the overall ensemble guidance, the overall pattern throughout the next several weeks. And this suggests a lowering in the pressures all across the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific basins. That, again, is in response to a convectively coupled Kelvin wave right now that's passing over the Eastern Pacific, giving us multiple systems out here in the Eastern Pacific to monitor. Eventually, this will cross into the Atlantic Basin and set up shop out here in the western portions of the Atlantic and maybe stretching out to the main development region. And this is what we look at going forward out with time. Does this model make sense? The short answer is yes. The model makes a ton of sense given what we've seen in other model guidance, given what we are expecting, the overall pattern, the overall trends over the last several weeks. This makes sense. The solution makes sense. Is it going to pan out like this? Absolutely not. Is it going to pan out 100%? No, it is not going to pan out 100% like this. However, the pattern, the overall larger scale pattern, suggests a reduction in the pressures across the Atlantic main development region, the Western Atlantic, the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and the Eastern Pacific as we set up a high pressure system out here that's going to lower the pressures out here and maybe allow for some development down here. Now, do we see anything in the models? The GFS forecast model here, the 12Z run from tropicaltidbits.com, nothing out here in the Atlantic Basin throughout that time, throughout the 27th of June. We do notice we have a couple of systems trying to form out here in the Eastern Pacific Basin. And again, you notice these tropical waves, these little areas of vorticity that try to get going out here. You know, this is far out in time right now, so we're not really going to worry about this, and it's nothing to worry about. But again, there is a overall sign that times of life, the life of the Atlantic Basin is going to kick in here over the next several weeks or so. But again, nothing really showing up in terms of tropical cyclone formation in the Atlantic Basin, although there is a larger scale pattern, a larger scale signal that something may be lurking on the horizon. What exactly that is, we don't know yet. Again, it's too far out in time to determine what is going to form, where it's going to form, how strong it be, or where it's going to go. We don't have those answers right now. However, this does kind of give you the clues to the game. It's like playing a detective. It's like being a detective. You gotta know your clues, basically. and you got to play a guessing game sometimes, but also use your knowledgeable sense. This is telling us that the larger scale pattern is going to be more supportive over the next several weeks in the early July for tropical cyclone formation, either in the eastern Pacific Basin or the western half of the Atlantic Basin. So either of those two basins might have something to deal with by the time we get into the early part of July. So again, a lot to talk about here over the next several days or so. Again, if you guys do want to go follow exactly what I'm doing with these unmanned camera systems, make sure to go follow me on Twitter at MikeRomali1. Again, these unmanned camera systems will be capturing all the fury and the raw power of tropical cyclones as they make landfall along the coastlines. And again, these will be live and they will not be behind a paywall for anybody to watch. This will be free to everybody, and we hope to be getting more camera systems and better camera systems with time. So if you guys do want to go support this, you guys do want to help out with what we're doing, make sure to go follow me on Twitter. If you guys do want to get involved on this, don't be shy to send a tweet over my way. If you guys have any thoughts or suggestions, make sure to put them in the comments or send me a tweet. I'm always looking for suggestions and ways to improve different types of things that we're doing. Any type of feedback is welcome. So with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon, evening. I am Michael Romali, and I will see you guys back here then tomorrow afternoon. Stay safe, everyone.